So a long time ago, and I can't believe I'm starting to hit that age, a long time ago. So, long time ago when I was a student at Johnson Bible College, now Johnson University, Michelle and I lived in non-traditional housing. So there was this section where married students would live, and we lived in this duplex. It was like a 3-bedroom duplex, 2 of them right together. It's one of those situations where as soon as you walk in, you're like in the living room. And then you look over a little bit, and there's a little kitchenette. Then to the left, there's a hallway, and there's a laundry room and 3 bedrooms. Well, at the end of the hall, there's master bedroom, and then there's what is my office at the time. And the hallway is like really tiny, just this way, and the doors are directly apart. So Michelle decides that she wants to have a baby. Like, I'm a full-time student. I'm like, all right, let's go with it. We'll juggle all kinds of stuff. So she is like rolling with this stuff. And some time goes on. And we're in this duplex. And a few things start to happen. And we're like, that's odd. Then we go on with life. And a few things start to happen. And we're like, that's odd. We go on and a few things start to happen. And we're like, that's really odd. Well, some time goes on and the baby's born. The woman was with child, right? Is that how we need to talk about it? So the baby's born, Christian comes into the world, and Michelle and Christian, it's late one night, I'm working on a paper. It's like 2 a.m. But with an infant in the house, you know, it's like, okay, you're on their schedule. So it's like 2 a.m. Michelle is asleep in the master bedroom. 3 feet across, I'm in my office, and my desk is at this door, at this wall, so the door is to my left. And I'm typing on this paper, and I'm only about 2 feet away from the door, and it's one of those deals where the door doesn't just open. You know, it's like rooted down in the carpet, so you gotta like push the door. So I'm there, the door's closed, pounding away on this paper, and I hear some noise down the hall, and I'm like, Michelle's up. So I bet the baby's up. So I'll go in there and check in a minute. So I'm still typing. Here's some commotion toward the kitchen area. And I'm thinking, oh, she's making me a sandwich. You know, this is great. Fantastic. So a few minutes later, the door opens. Just about this far, the door opens. So I stop typing and I just lean back thinking, you know, here's the plates and here's a drink and all this. And I'm sitting there and the door opens. And it's pitch black. And I'm like, where's my sandwich? You know, no, I'm kidding. I'm like, Michelle? Nothing. Like, Michelle? Nothing. Michelle? Nothing. So I get up, I go across this 3-foot-long hallway, open the door, and she's knocked out. Lights are off, and she is asleep. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? What's happening here? So we keep that to ourselves for a little bit. 1 or 2 other things happen, and then we decide to go talk to one of my professors. So we go over and we share the details. And when we first started talking, they're looking at us like we're just out of it. And then we share a few more details, and they're like, you know what? You really need to talk to so-and-so because there were some incidents that occurred. And we're like, oh my gosh. I bet if you had an opportunity, you could share some stuff that's happened, right? Some stuff that's unexplainable. And then you start to think, should I even share this? Should I talk to somebody about this? I mean, how do you explain it? And if I start to explain it, is it going to make sense? Are they going to think I'm out of it? Are they going to listen? And what I've learned over time, especially in the church world, is that there's some stuff that haunts us. And it's in your own domain. It's where you live, or where you work, or where you go, or it's right inside. You're haunted. You don't know how to deal with some stuff. We were at the Millstone Festival yesterday. Phenomenal turnout. That's great. Back home, we call it the Poke Salad Festival. So it's neat to see how you do it in Richmond, and it was phenomenal. And we were over at a booth. Several people came by. Janet and Gary came by. I think Roberta came by for a little bit, and Missy set up shop, and we just made a ton of connections with people. And one individual came up to our table and said, will you pray with me? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. So this individual leans in, and I pray, and as I'm praying, like halfway through, this individual whispers something to me, and I could tell in that moment, I asked them about this, I could tell in that moment that it was haunting them. Not only was it haunting them, they really didn't want to talk about it, or at least they didn't know if they should. Can I share this? Can I start to explain my experience? Will it be heard? Now, here's what we're going to do with this series. Every week, we're going to give you an opportunity to be really practical with how you engage these stories. And is Sean here? Okay, we'll talk about him a little bit. No, just kidding. But he set up last week saying that this is going to be a sermon series on emotions. Not accurate. We're going to look at some stories in both the Old and New Testament that put us face to face with our reality and the reality of God's redemptive reach. And then we're going to ask ourselves, how do we step into these stories? And if there's something very specific that's haunting us, well, what do we do about this haunted place? How do I sort through this and begin to explain what has been going on in my life? And then we're going to give you an outlet for that. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But we're going to use a story that actually just puts us way back at the beginning. It's the beginning of the Bible. It comes from the book of Genesis. And it's the creation story where God creates humanity. And after creating humanity, looks out at the landscape and says, oh, that's so good. And right before sin enters the world and starts to seep into this creation and just permeate everything we know, we read this in Genesis 2, verse 25, that the man and the woman, they were naked, and what? They felt no shame. That's the author of Genesis. That's the author's cue that what he's going to talk about next sets shame up as like the central issue. And I've been human long enough to know that a lot of us, we are haunted by shame. I was talking with a guy several years ago. He actually filled out a card and sent it my way, and I read it, and it was in all caps, his writing. It said, I am eat up with shame. Now, when we're talking about shame, a lot of times the words shame and guilt get thrown into the same context, but they're different. Guilt is this dynamic where you do something, so you're guilty, and you're guilty because you did something, right? So when we break the boundaries of God's design, we're guilty. And not only are we guilty because we did it, we're in this status, this realm of guilt. That's why we're justified. We're made right with God through our faith in Jesus. Well, shame isn't so much about what I did. Actually, shame takes it a step farther. And shame doesn't say, I did. Shame says, I am. And I've done enough pastoral care to know that that gets in people's heads. It gets in their hearts, and it really messes with their identity. And one of the most common phrases that I've heard is, I am unwanted. Shame hits home for a lot of people. And it makes you feel like you're different. And since you're different, there's no place for you to really fit in. And it's not so much that when you're alone that you feel it. It's when you're with other people, and then you really feel it. There's something said in a conversation, or someone brings up a topic that you've been struggling with, and man, that's really relatable. And it drives up all these memories, these experiences that you've had. And you start to think about those, and you go down that road that I am. And maybe it's not unwanted for you. Maybe you would fill in the blank a little different. I am. And that's what shame says to us. So the story goes on. At the end of chapter 2, they felt no shame. But then this serpent has this dialogue with Eve. If you've been around church for a while, you know this story where there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's some fruit, forbidden fruit that's eaten, and sin seeps into the world. It just starts permeating this planet. Well, one of the neat things is that this serpent comes along, and he actually drops this line to one of these freshly designed humans. And he says, I know God was saying some stuff to you. Like there's this tree over here that's unavailable, but did God really say? And I bet some of you can step into the story right there. You've got this thing we call the Holy Bible. or the Word of God, and there's just some passages in it, some teachings that are very tricky or complicated for you, but in your heart of hearts, you know that that text is speaking directly to you. But when you read it, you think, well, is this really applicable to me? Is this really calling me out? It's really interesting. This guy named John Lennox, he's like an intellectual Bible scholar, just a phenomenal guy. And he does a lot of debates with people who do not have our belief system. And he was in one setting, and there were a group of people who were just sharp, off the charts IQ. And it's a Q&A time. So one guy speaks up and he says, John, with all due respect, how in the world can you say you serve a God that limits you? Maybe that's another relatable point for you. You feel that some of Christianity, or maybe the way you grew up in the church you did, that Christianity or God tries to limit you. To a degree, that's true. It tries to limit the stuff that doesn't belong. So this person asks, John, you're so sharp. You're so studied. You are so educated. How in the world can you believe in a God who wants to limit you? And without missing a beat, you can find the video on YouTube. Without missing a beat, John Lennox says, that is a really interesting question. And with his German accent, he says, I immediately take note that that was first asked by a snake. And the room went quiet. It was good. So maybe that's the deceit, though, that's in your world right now. Did God really say? So you're standing in the threshold deciding whether you're going to open this door or not. And what's interesting is that you've actually opened it before. And you've walked through. And at the beginning of the room, you look around and you like this room. You've spent a little time there. You've left the room. You've come back to your reality. And you're just filled with shame that you had a place in there for a while. Did God really say? So the story goes on. It was like, did God really say you shouldn't eat of all the trees? Because what God is really doing is He's limiting you. Because He knows if you eat this, then you'll be like Him. And you'll know good and evil. Now the interesting thing for you perceptive readers is that they have already been created in the image of God. They are already like God. The only nuance is that they're totally unaware experientially what it means to engage sin or breaking of the boundary, if you will. That's what they don't know. They're aware that this idea of sin exists. God has set the boundaries. He has told them, don't go there. So they're aware that some things are off limits. But they breached that boundary. And now they're not only aware of what we call sin, they've experienced it. And that's where guilt slips in and opens the door to shame. That's why the author sets it up. They were naked. They felt no shame. And then this spiral occurs. And maybe that's true for you. You're not only aware, you've experienced it. You've experienced this idea of sin that just separates us from God. And that's what it does. It just separates us from God and from each other. I think I told you one time that my dad and I used to go to Kings Island all the time. When I was a little fella, we would go up there all the time to Kings Island. And I was around 10 or 11, and I'm playing this one game. My dad wanted me to play it. It was an archery game with a crossbow. And the crossbow was super cute, super cool. And it was about 30 feet the target. You had to stand behind this platform. You could bend down a little bit, but you couldn't go over this platform. You had one shot. It was like $5 for one shot. And there was a target there. And you had to hit dead center. If you didn't get dead center, if you were even on the line of center, it was out of bounds. And my dad was like, you can do this, you got this, you can do this, just hyping me up, encouraging me. And I remember sitting there, I was so still, and he was like, just be still, then take a breath, hold it, then when you're ready, pull the trigger. And I did all that stuff, and it just, boom, I actually have the thing back home where I got just dead on bullseye and won this big stuffed animal or anything like that. But the deal is, that's what the word sin means or represents. It is a literal missing of the mark. The target has been outlined. This is the aim. This is the goal. This is what you're shooting for, shooting at. This is it. And when you miss that, you literally sin. And that's now what Adam and Eve have been exposed to. They're not only aware, but they've experienced. They are missing the mark. Why? Because they want something that has been put off limits. And as the author set us up at the end of chapter 2, they're going to start experiencing the depth of shame. And if that's where you are in your life right now, we have some hope for you. But before we get there, the story goes on. And the woman looks at this fruit that's forbidden. And the text actually, it's not worded, well, it's worded this way, but it's not listed this way in your Bible. I just did these kind of bullet forms so you could see this. The woman actually looks at this fruit that she shouldn't be eating, but now she's taking a second glance at it. And she sees that it's good, and it's pleasing, and it's desirable. Have you ever been there? You know there's something that's off limits, but you're able to take a step back and look at that and rationalize it and convince yourself in the moment that this is actually good or pleasing. And it is definitely desirable. I was thinking when I was a kid, I had this crazy bad habit of biting my fingernails. Anybody else? Anybody else grow out of it? Me either. All right. So I had this habit of biting my fingernails, and it was a really big problem. You know, bite them down really, really far to the quick and all of that stuff. And it was a really big deal. My parents wanted to take care of it. So they found this stuff that you could buy in like a droplet tube, and it was like awful. And they would just come along and they would just put it all over my fingers. In about 5 minutes, it was dried. So you could kind of see this coating on there. And to the taste, oh, it was awful for the first time. And then over time, I'm telling you, it was like a personal brand of like hot sauce. Like over time, I got to thinking, this is actually good. This is really good. So I'm looking for the container, thinking, take the lid off, sprinkle it on the tacos. You know, it's all good, but I kid you not. It was funny, but I kid you not. Over time, I wanted to bite my nails so much, had that urge, that inclination so much, that I got used to this taste. And it started tasting good. This junk on my fingernails had become good and pleasing and desirable. And I found myself sometimes thinking, oh, I can put that on. Or I can find it because they kept all the medicine put away. I can find it. And maybe that's where you can step into this story. Again, if you're a perceptive reader, you're probably noticing that the enemy came to engage Eve when she was alone. And what she shouldn't have was available. Now, don't raise your hand, but I bet that's hitting home for some people. This comes when you're alone, and what you shouldn't have is available. You've engaged that. And now, right now, you just feel the depth of shame. But we've got some hope for you. And I want you to take advantage of what I'm going to offer you here in just a moment. I want you to embrace it and actually say, you know what? This is something that I can literally do. I can actually help myself with this because of the one who is trying to help me. So the story goes on, and the two are filled with this shame and starting to take over, and they hear God coming into the garden. I don't know why he was disconnected, but he's coming into the garden. They hear him, so they go and they hide. And God's searching for these two, and he says, hey, where are you? And they speak up and they say, well, we heard you coming. We knew all about what had happened. So I hid. Several years ago, I was preaching, going through a series on sin and shame. And I got word afterward that a wife had nudged her husband. And I called this guy and I asked him if I could use this story and reuse it just so that it can make a difference in the lives of other people. And he gave me full permission. But she nudged him, and he's telling me about this. She nudged him and said, you know what? You need to go talk to David. So he reached out. We decided to get coffee at Starbucks. When we go to Starbucks, we sit in kind of the middle of the foyer there, the seating area. We get 2 tables, get 2 drinks. We sit down, just a very casual conversation for about 5 minutes. And he says, okay, let's get down to business. And he said, if any moment in this conversation, you just get up and leave, and you never speak to me again, I totally understand it. Because what I'm about to tell you, these are his words, what I'm about to tell you is going to be the worst stuff you have ever heard. Nobody will be able to top what I'm about to tell you. And for the next 2 hours, I listened to this guy just share his story, open book, and give me some very, very deflating details of what was going on in his life. There were a couple of times where I like, maybe this is a good moment to step away. But I felt the Holy Spirit just saying, no, be present in this moment. Be present in this moment. So I listened to this guy. He just shares his heart about what's happened. And I kid you not, to this day, and it's about 10 years ago, to this day, no one has ever topped what this guy told me. When he shared his story with me at Starbucks that day, I got a call from him not too long after that. And some things had started to get better in his life. Some of the relationships that had been broken and damaged started to restore. Some good communication lines were open between him and his family. And he was actually on a really good path because he opened up. You know, when we open up and we talk about stuff that haunts us, because like we said earlier, sometimes you're like, can I really share this? Is this something I need to share? Can I explain this? Will I be heard? How will people hear what I'm about to say? But it's haunting you. There's a biblical word for that. It's called confession. And in the New Testament, you can actually, one of our authors, you can read this. He says, this comes from James chapter 5, says, confess your sins. Confess when you miss the mark. Confess that to one another. So that, not so people can know what's going on in your life, not just so that you can get it off your chest, but so that you can be healed in here and break free from that grip of shame that's saying you are unwanted or you are, and however you've been filling in the blank. So in just a moment, here's what we're going to do. I want to meet you. You don't have to share anything out loud. You don't have to share anything with the congregation, but I want to meet you right over here. And I want to meet you there as a challenge to you. Because I'm wondering if you've tried to break the patterns of behaviors that create the shame in your life. I'm wondering if you've tried to break those before and it just hasn't worked. Or it worked for a few days, but it didn't stick. I want to challenge you to meet me right over here because maybe in coming up here, and again, we don't know all the details. And you don't have to share anything or everything with the church, but we can talk over here and we can pray. But I want you to meet me at the cross. And I want you to meet me at the cross for a very specific reason. We'll get there in just a second. But I want you to come over here. Maybe you can confess to God, and I'll be right beside of you. I'll just be there with you. And maybe you're looking for some internal healing because there's some stuff haunting you, and you just don't know what to do with it. And if that's you and you don't know what to do with it, here's your opportunity to do something with it. So in just a moment, after we take communion, I want you to meet me at the cross. And before we do, communion, every week. And I love churches that take communion every week because it's a weekly reminder. And I've never been of the mindset that this gets old or routine. I've never been of that mindset because every single week, we have a reminder of what has been done for us. Those of us who are guilty, and that guilt has created shame, we're reminded every single week that Jesus Christ is available for you and for me simply because of this, because of the shame. This is the reason we do this. So we eat this little bit of bread, we drink this little bit of juice to remember that his life has been exchanged for ours. And all that dirty stuff, or all that stuff that wants to say you are, Jesus came to give you a new identity, to bring you into his kingdom, to restore you, to help you talk through some stuff, sort some stuff out so that you can be healed. And all you have to do is accept what he's offering. I love that. Roberta asked me to share a story about this, and I was like, I don't know if it'll work or not, but I got to thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I think that actually will. I think that actually will work. So Bella and I, our family, we like wrestling, okay? Fire me. Okay, we just like wrestling a little bit. It's a family thing. I grew up with it. It was really big, my hometown and all this stuff. So Bella's into it now, and one of her favorite wrestlers, well, her favorite wrestler is a guy named Cody Rhodes. He's the son of Dusty Rhodes, and he's like the big dog in wrestling right now. He's the world champ. He's everywhere. So we had an opportunity to land some really good tickets, and Bella would give anything to meet this guy. He wasn't my favorite. So we drive down to Nashville this past Friday to go to one of their televised events called SmackDown. And we've got these really good seats, and we're hoping that we can like high five Cody or something like that. And Cody comes out and it's like, oh, here's your chance, Bella. Get a picture of him. I'll do a video. Maybe you can touch his hand or something like that. And he comes over, and Bella has this sign, because this was part of her birthday setup. So she has this sign that says, hey, I'm here for my birthday, and I want to meet the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. She's got this sign draped over the banister there. And Cody comes over, and he's got to get to his match, right? It's a timed televised event. So he comes over and he leans back and he's like, hey, I promise I'm going to come back and sign that for you. I promise. And as a dad, my heart melted. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did you really just say that? What? So the dude goes, he gets in the ring, wrestles, does his business, and it's a dark match. If you watched SmackDown Friday and you're trying to fact check me and you didn't see Cody, it was a dark match, okay? Which is a match after the televised event goes off. So Cody wins, and then he says some stuff to the crowd. Then he gets out of the ring, and he goes all the way to the first rows, all the way around the ring, just signing autographs and taking pictures with people. And he comes and he shows up to Bella, and then he signs her poster, grabs her phone, turns it around, takes a few selfies, rocks her world. But as he's going around the ring, I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude's taking this thing over. This isn't even WWE. There's no other wrestler. And the people are just waiting, hoping to meet this guy. And he's just walking around. He's the coolest guy, nicest guy. But he's just taking this event over. And the impact he's making. And the impact he's making on individual lives. People there hoping for an experience, an encounter with this guy. And they're getting their worlds rocked. It was amazing. That's exactly what Jesus has done. And he has come to this earth so that you and I can have an encounter with him. And take over and rock your world. And that's why he's here. And that's available for you in this very moment. That's why the Hebrew author would say, Jesus went to the cross and he scorned its shame. It was shameful to hang on a cross until Jesus did it. And now there's power in it. It's an opportunity of being healed. Having an encounter with something that can hopefully get you somewhere that you were never able to get yourself. And that starts with you taking a step and another step, another step right here. So if that's you and you're just like the guy from several years ago, you're eat up with shame. Let's break that. Let's confess. Let's heal you up. So as we take this bread and drink this juice, I'll be right over here. And I'd love to meet you at the cross. God, thank you for all that you offer us and for the way you love us and for taking over our lives and reshaping our experiences and breaking the patterns that create shame in our lives and giving us a new identity. We praise you for that. And right now, Father, I pray for anyone and everyone who's wrestling with whether they should come up here or not. Give them that nudge, whatever it is they need. Let them know this is a safe place for them to talk about the stuff that haunts them and to start taking their first steps forward. God, you're good, and we know that because of Jesus. So as always, we use his name to pray and praise you. Amen.